Boom! I'm sorry if I scared you. I'm usually very happy and sometimes I can be very loud. Forgetting that, it's nice to see you again, kids. For the new ones, I'm Bonley the Lock-Beard Bunny.
Hey Bonley, I found dynamite. Are we already on the air? Children, today we are going to learn how to use dynamite or other explosive materials, and the best of all is that you can make your own homemade dynamite. It will be great.
You heard perfectly well. These fragments were taken from the popular animated series Childhood Fantasy. And I emphasize, this animated series is for children like all childhood fantasy. This is all recent, since the morning this episode was published. Logically, the criticism and reproaches did not wait. Several parents began to complain about promoting explosives. To all this, Childhood Fantasy made a statement, something typical of them, where we can observe many things. However, we will focus on supposedly defaming childhood fantasy. That is wrong. Neovision Channel, we try to make our investigations concrete and based on facts. We admit that we tend to suspect, no longer judge or harm. Childhood fantasy has many secrets. It probably has them without us knowing. But it has problems, and throughout our history we have collected 4 very serious cases related to childhood fantasy. First case, problem toys. In 1978, Childhood Fantasy sold a large number of toys, but several complaints from parents began to claim that their children began to get sick and blistered. Finally, it was discovered that the plastic was contaminated with mild but very worrying radiation. 11 children were hospitalized, the toys were removed, and Childhood Fantasy tried to deviate from what they wanted to harm them when there was evidence. Case 2, exploitation of merchandise. It is a fact that Childhood Fantasy often creates innovative toys. This leads to several complaints about job exploration by some former employees, yet Childhood Fantasy denies the accusations and for some strange reason always wins the complaint. Case 3, scams. Between 1988 to 1989, parents complained of scams by Childhood Fantasy. Because the toys cost too much money and broke easily and even fell apart when touched, Childhood Fantasy was forced to issue refunds and for the first time apologized. Finally, Case 4, Childhood Fantasy Local 34. Perhaps the most disturbing, macabre and disconcerting incident in the entire history of childhood fantasy. Marlon Bourbon, at only 8 years old, suffered one of the worst and unfortunate deaths at the hands of a product, a toy, or rather an animatronic. Marlon attended Childhood Fantasy Local 34 with her parents. Her parents left her in the lunchroom, however Marlon wanted to see Bonley. It should be noted that the famous protagonist of the animated series of the same name had an animatronic version. It also left one of the most intriguing doubts: what happened to the animatronics or